Imagine flying over the Peruvian desert and suddenly realizing the ground beneath you is not random. It never was. Stretching across nearly 500 square kilometers of the arid Nazca Plateau in southern Peru, there are hundreds of enormous lines, geometric shapes, and animal figures etched into the earth, so massive that most of them can only be fully appreciated from the air. A hummingbird with a wingspan of 90 meters, a spider so precise it mirrors a rare Amazonian genus, a monkey with a spiraling tail, a condor with wings that stretch nearly 130 meters from tip to tip. These are the Nazca Lines, and they have captivated, confused, and divided scholars, archaeologists, and dreamers for nearly a century. The question that has haunted explorers and researchers since the lines were first formally studied in the 1940s is deceptively simple. Who built them, and why? To understand the mystery, you first have to understand the place. The Nazca Plateau is one of the driest places on Earth. It almost never rains. The wind is minimal. Temperatures can be brutal. And yet, this harsh, lifeless landscape became one of the most elaborate open-air canvases in all of human history. The climate, as it turns out, is one of the reasons the lines have survived at all. The extreme aridity and the peculiar chemistry of the soil have preserved these geoglyphs for somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500 years, depending on which section of the site you're examining. The lines themselves were made by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the desert surface and piling them at the edges of the designs. Beneath those pebbles lies a pale, yellowish-gray ground. The contrast is stark and deliberate. The ancient Nazca people didn't need to dig deep. They simply moved what was already there. Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia first noted the lines in 1927, though he initially thought they might be ancient roads or irrigation channels. It wasn't until German-born mathematician and archaeologist Maria Reiche arrived in the 1940s that the lines received sustained scientific attention. Reiche dedicated more than 50 years of her life to studying, mapping, and protecting the Nazca Lines. She measured, she calculated, she camped in the desert with little more than a lantern and a broom to sweep sand off the figures. She became so associated with the site that after her death in 1998, she was buried there. But Reich's devotion raises its own question. What was she really looking at? The Nazca culture flourished in this region from roughly 100 BCE to 800 CE. They built aqueducts. They created vivid, beautiful pottery. They were sophisticated people with a deep relationship with water, which, given their desert home, was essentially a relationship with survival itself. Archaeologists have found evidence of ritual offerings and religious ceremonial sites throughout the region. The culture clearly understood astronomy, geometry, and large-scale planning. They were not primitive. They were not struggling. They were, by all available evidence, a society that had time and energy to devote to extraordinary artistic and symbolic projects. And yet, the sheer scale of what they created is staggering. Some of the straight lines run for miles without deviation. The animal figures, some of which are so large you need to walk for 10 minutes to trace their outline, are geometrically consistent. There are no obvious corrections, no wild mistakes, no areas where the designers clearly gave up and started over. The craftsmanship is, by any measure, remarkable. So, how they do it? The honest answer is, probably not as mysteriously as you might hope. Experimental archaeologists have demonstrated that small teams of workers, using wooden stakes, simple cords, and basic surveying techniques, could have planned and executed these figures with relative accuracy. You start with a scale drawing. You transfer it to the ground using a grid system. You mark your lines with stakes and string, and then you begin moving rocks. The technique is labor-intensive, but it isn't magic. It doesn't require alien technology or lost civilizations. What it requires is organized human effort, sustained over time in service of something the builders clearly believed was profoundly important. But that brings us to the most enduring mystery. Not how, but why. Maria Reiche believed the Nazca Lines were an astronomical calendar, a giant map of the night sky, encoding the movements of the sun, moon, and stars to help predict seasons and agricultural cycles. It's a compelling idea, and she spent decades trying to prove it. Some lines do align with solstices or the positions of certain constellations at particular times of year. But subsequent researchers, including astronomer Gerald Hawkins, who famously cracked the code of Stonehenge, applied computer analysis to the Nazca alignments and concluded that while some were consistent with astronomical phenomena, the overall pattern wasn't significantly better than chance. The astronomical calendar theory, for all its elegance, has struggled to hold up under full statistical scrutiny. Another theory, advanced by anthropologist Johann Reinhard and others, positions the lines within the context of Andean water worship and mountain deity ritual. The Nazca people were obsessed with water. They had to be. Their aqueducts, called puquios, were engineering feats designed to tap underground water sources in a desert where rain was a rumor. In this interpretation, the lines weren't meant to be seen from the air at all. They were sacred paths, routes for ceremonial processions, walked by priests and communities, and rituals designed to petition the gods for rain, for fertility, for survival. The figures themselves, the hummingbird, a symbol of fertility, the spider, associated with rain in Andean cosmology, the whale, connected to the sea and the water cycle, would then be enormous prayers, drawn on the earth itself in the hope that the gods above might notice. This theory has gained significant traction among modern researchers. It fits the archaeological record. It fits the religious and cultural context. And it's supported by the fact that many of the lines radiate outward from specific centers, almost like spokes on a wheel toward distant mountains or water sources. Then, of course, there are the theories that take things in a very different direction. In 1968, Swiss author Erich von Däniken published a book called Chariots of the Gods, and the Nazca Lines became one of his primary exhibits in a sweeping argument that ancient civilizations were visited by extraterrestrial beings. His claim was simple: the lines look like runways. The figures are too large to be seen from the ground. Therefore, they must have been built as signals or landing strips for alien spacecraft. The idea exploded into popular culture. It made the Nazca Lines a household name, and it has lingered for decades in documentaries, podcasts, and late-night conversations. But the theory dissolves quickly under examination. Runways for aircraft need to be flat, reinforced, and capable of bearing enormous weight. The Nazca Lines are simply scratches in the desert surface, a few inches deep at most. Landing a spacecraft on them would destroy them instantly. More fundamentally, the argument that the figures are too large to be seen from the ground misunderstands the Andean worldview entirely. In many indigenous traditions across the Americas, monumental art and ritual construction weren't meant for human eyes at all. They were meant for the gods, for the sky, for forces far larger than any human observer. The scale wasn't a mistake or an accident requiring alien explanation. It was the point. There is also a quieter, more philosophical problem with the alien theory. It removes agency and genius from the people who actually built these lines. The Nazca were real. Their culture was real. Their engineering capacity was real and demonstrably sophisticated. To credit their greatest achievement to extraterrestrials is, in a meaningful sense, to erase them. What we're left with is a mystery that is, in some ways, more interesting than any single solution could be. The Nazca Lines are a monument to human intention, to the fact that, even in one of the most inhospitable environments on Earth, a civilization decided to make something enormous and intricate and enduring. Whether they were walking those lines in ceremonial procession, reading the stars and their geometry, or calling out to their water gods across the sky, the Nazca people left behind something that has outlasted their language, their temples, and almost every trace of their daily lives. The lines are what remain. UNESCO recognized the Nazca Lines as a World Heritage Site in 1994. Today, the plateau is protected, or at least it tries to be. In 2014, Greenpeace activists damaged part of the site during a publicity stunt that left boot prints in the fragile ground near the hummingbird figure. The irony was searing. A group tried to protect the planet left a scar on one of its most ancient treasures. The desert preserves, but it doesn't forgive. Aerial tours still fly over the lines daily. Archaeologists continue to find new figures. As recently as 2020, Researchers using aerial photography and AI image analysis announced the discovery of more than 140 previously unidentified geoglyphs, including human figures and animals that had gone unnoticed for millennia, hidden in plain sight. The Nazca Lines are still speaking. We're still learning how to listen. And maybe that's the real answer to who built them. Not aliens, not gods, not lost civilizations from Atlantis. Just people, remarkably, stubbornly, magnificently human people, who looked at a blank desert and decided it needed to say something, who spent years of their lives moving stones in the sun, so that something greater than themselves might look down and understand. That impulse to leave a mark, to be seen, to communicate across an unimaginable distance, is not alien at all. It's the most human thing there is. If you're the kind of person who lies awake wondering about questions like these, who we are, where we came from, what we've forgotten about the civilizations that came before us, then you belong on WonderStream. We go deep on the stories that keep curious minds restless. Subscribe to WonderStream, hit the notification bell, and we'll see you on the next journey.